To begin with, I would like to first of all open the forum to all three of you. Anybody can take it up. When we talk about next generational leadership, leadership has different contexts when it comes to people who've been managing it for ages, and now that we have new generational leaders. So, what is that definition or that wider scope that you look at when we talk about the new age or the next gen leadership?
Okay, I can get going then. Of course, the other two esteemed panelists can add. From my perspective, again, I represent an organization called Ericsson, and we've really been investing a lot in terms of our mindset when it comes to next generation leaders, right? Because one thing is constant, and that's change. And we realize that in the industry we are in, technology will constantly disrupt us, and so will be the external and internal environment and factors, right? So for leaders to be abreast with how to operate, succeed, and excel in a VUCA world is a basic competence trait to have. And when we invest in leaders, we look at multiple things. To me, it's important that they continue to embrace the cultural values and mindsets that we need our leaders to have to continue to grow on our DNA that we are quite proud of. At the same time, we have to have our leaders pivot towards emerging trends in leadership, right? So one thing I would say among that really starts to build that whole expectation is having an agile mindset, which equips them to be able to lead in a VUCA world. And of course, VUCA is not a new term for anyone in this room. You understand how that's the reality that we are living in today. And the last 3 years have been a clear indication of that, right? When we talk about agile mindset, it's also about having a change mindset. When we choose to look at every situation as an opportunity versus a challenge. Simple thing like COVID as well, could have disrupted everything that we possibly were used to, but we chose to pivot towards taking this as an opportunity and get some almost 120,000 people to work remotely overnight. And then on top of it, we succeeded in delivering the best ever financial results for ourselves in the next 2 or 3 years of being in that current situation. So that's one, having an agile mindset. At the same time, having diversity of opinions is extremely important. How do we create an environment as leaders where people can bring their diverse perspectives in, be free to speak up and speak their mind? So as leaders, how do they create that inclusive, diverse environment, culture, and encourage diversity of mindset? And the third thing I would say is, as a leader, how these next generation leaders have to create an environment where it's all about collective success, trust and collaboration, leading with empathy and humanness, right? Because the next gen and today's workplace has a combination of people who are next gen, millennials, baby boomers. So as leaders, they have to be able to create a purpose and a value argumentation for a wide variety and range of people. So how do they create that level of mindset and inclusiveness in the environment? And at the same time, ensure that we work together as a team. Because collectively working and performing and succeeding is the only way one can succeed, right? And that's what we're trying to work towards. So many more things to add, but these would be the top of my mind.
While I do see there have been certain aspects that have been highlighted by you, when we talk about inculcating these values within the organizational realm, whether you can also answer this question, how do you think that, having such policies or such inclusions within the organizational realm affects the organizational setup in the way to its vision, how they think, how they enact? How do you think this imbibingness lays a difference on the organizational realm?
I think Priyanka has added and said a lot. So I think for me, the next generation leaders are work in progress. They are people who are continuously progressing, and people who are able to, who are capable of changing, and people who are change capable, and people who can develop teams under them who are able to drive that change. So I think that's very important. People who are, who can embrace vulnerability, people who are able to come and stand up and say that, okay, fine, results, top line, bottom line is very important, but for us, what is also important, how do we connect people to the purpose, self-purpose and the organizational vision which we are driving. So I think the very important thing which comes in my mind is that how these next generation leaders are able to drive that purpose, that connectedness with the organization.
And when we talk about, the role of such leadership within an organization? Do you think technology is an enabler in this place?
Absolutely. If you want to be
Okay.
in the game or you want to be the game changer, technology is everything today. If you can't embrace, if you can't understand that, whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it is data analytics, whether it is automation to the next level simulations, if you are not upbeat, you're not in the game. You're out of it. So leaders who are able to understand customers' need and able to, transform the technology, adaptation, upgradation are in the game. So and that helps because the decisions are quick. They say when the decisions are, I would say, very well informed decisions. So the risk is calculated. So technology does help.
Renu, do you want to add anything to it?
I wish we had some more energy here. Yeah, so I hope all of you are. We're talking about next gen. So I hope you're keen to hear us. So I'll go a step back and I'll just frame my thoughts around this. Though I hate to put anyone in a bucket, and this is my personal view. In my family, I have my mother and my husband of the same generation, but my son of the next generation, my niece, and so on. And I see them as different as chalk and cheese. But yes, I think as human beings, we always like to see pattern. And yes, if you come with certain kind of history, or shared history, or shared century, or shared years of experience, you belong to a certain generation. So yes, the next generation is definitely different from many of the other generations, and we can put them in as having some common features. Like I see the next gen leader in my organization as somebody who are like tech native. I think we have seen the way things move on paper and then we translate them to tech. But then it's like, you have a generation which thinks in Hindi and then speaks in English. But there's a generation which only thinks in English and then speaks in English. So the difference. So one is about thought process. Communication, I think they speak their mind because this generation or the other generation has taught them that, but they definitely speak their mind. They may appear to be very irreverent. And when you have your team members speaking their mind, if you are hierarchical in your thought process or your leadership style, you don't feel good about it. And so you forget the content and you look at the style of their speaking, but you have to adjust to them. So I would say next generation, if you see some pattern, yeah, they speak their mind. They may appear to be irreverent. And there are many female as compared to the previous generation. And I would believe, and I've seen that tier 2, tier 3 cities have got good representation in many organizations in this generation of leadership, which brings a very fresh perspective. Are they inclusive? I don't think there's any empirical study about that. Yes, they are diverse. What is the value they bring to the organization? I think they bring fresh perspective. They bring how to work with tech with ease. And because they question the status quo, I think they bring that kind of change or speed of change in the organization. These are the values I see from them.
See, organizations today are pretty vocal about having next-gen leaders. While it is a pretty evident thing to see, but they also bring in new structures at work. That, sometimes traditional leaders who've been managing certain teams or managing a company might even consider it a hindrance, because next gen will always come out with new perspectives and fresh ways of dealing with the same situation that has been dealt over the years. How do you think that within the same organizational, a new generational leader can fit in with traditional beliefs or traditional mindsets still flowing the same way?
Maybe I can take a shot at it. So in my mind, like I said, we always have to groom leaders to be very clearly embracing our classical values, right? Which really are part of the DNA that makes us the organization that we are. At the same time, empowering them and creating an environment where they can pivot towards the new values, ways of working, and behaviors is equally important, right? So, from our perspective as an organization, we heavily invest in an inclusive leadership mindset. How do we create leaders who are both inclusive in terms of embracing what we have and also being open to embracing what is coming up as newer values? So, that's number one. The second thing I would say is extremely important that this whole collective success continues to come together. So as leaders, it's very important that they start to look at these trends and behaviors that are going to be imperative to how employees will feel motivated and engaged in an organization. So when it comes to employee engagement, how are we fulfilling the purpose? How do we as an organization value work-life balance? And how as an organization we are coming to fulfilling social causes that are relevant to employees? So we start to look at how leaders are creating that environment where employees feel empowered, they feel they can bring their full self to work, and also feel empowered to speak their mind. The third thing I would say is extremely important that as an organization, we are creating a huge set of repository of behaviors that indicate what should be those mindsets, right? We cut down on bureaucracy, on things that start to bring them to a position that they don't feel they can both add value or empowered or are being able to speak up. So from that perspective, I would say we've launched a big program called Ericsson on the Move, which has covered more than 7,500 leaders across the globe, across 180 countries, which kind of has 5 key tenets, right? We talk about empathy and humanness. As leaders, how do we ensure that we are being empathetic and human? And it's not just about work-life balance, it's also about understanding what people need and how can we be more flexible and more accommodative of people's individual needs. So how do we enable leaders to have curated conversations? The second thing we would talk about is collaboration and cooperation. How do we make it very clear to our people and our leaders that it's always going to be collective success that's valued much beyond individual successes, right? Once you have those messages going in, people start to realize that they have to take the teams along with them as leaders. And at the same time, the culture has to be representative of that. The third thing is how do we become more courageous and fact-based in the decisions we take? Extremely important that people start to become fact-based and agile in the way we take decisions and speedy in the way we execute things. The last thing I would say is extremely important, from many own perspectives is that we start to create better proof points and more testimonies of people embracing those behaviors and being rewarded for them. Not just having it written on the side of a wall, but looking at how we're creating a DNA that truly represents all of them. So the next generation leaders have to both become ambassadors of these behaviors, but also embrace and resonate them in their day-to-day work.
Beautifully curated. Thank you so much. Nida, would you like to add anything to it by quoting examples from within your own organization as to how does it function, or any anecdote that you can share with people on how it needs to be run?
See, I think if I talk of my organization, we are in disruptive world. We are electric vehicle OEM, so we are operating in disruption. So what we appreciate is people who are able to take up that, everyday change and, you have long-term goals, but you are able to really create those milestones, which are, I think, looking at next day, next month. So you're able to really, really come down to short goals. Secondly, what I see is that it's not just about that. It's about that how we are able to appreciate people, like Priyanka just said. So what's important is that it is not about knowing everything. It is about learners beating learned.
Right.
It is about how we are able to. We don't know answers, but we are able to ask questions. Right. These leaders, they really, or the value system I would look at is people who are able to differentiate when to follow, when to lead, when to get inside, when to give directions, when to just support from the back. So I think that's how the differentiator would be. That's how these leaders would look like. People who would be able to from traditional system, and I'm not trying to say that traditional people or that leadership is out, but the mindset is growth, which we all, I think, we talk of fixed and growth mindset. What is important is that you're able to balance compassion with results, compassion with or people centricity with customer centricity. How do you really balance that stakeholders? your internal, your external. So I think that is very important. What is good about these leaders or the future generation would be that they would be able to speak up, authenticity, and also they know what drives us, what drives them, and what they want to exhibit. What is really important for them to achieve in their personal life and their professional life. So they would speak.
Then it also means that they need to align with the company's policy. because
Absolutely align with company's policy, but they will be able to know what policies are really progressing them, not just for the sake of SOP,
Right.
but for the organizational growth as well as their personal and their team's growth.
So that means even if there have been certain policies that have been running from generations and in a way that they want to add value to it and they feel that such policies have not been reaping fruit, so taking a call that it is a right time that we now tend to discontinue these policies. And with
Absolutely.
changing times we need to evolve as well as put in new practices
And
to it.
after seeing pandemic time and VOCA, as we talk of Bani, VOCA, all, and maybe there'll be new terms coming up. It is so disruptive. It is so ever evolving today that you can't create something as a benchmark today, because it is changing. It is evolving every day. So there was work from office, then remote work came, and then hybrid came, and I don't know what next is going to come. So you have to be
We're living in
open.
an unpredictable
Absolutely,
world.
and you need to know how do you deliver.
My question to Renu is, while I feel it is important and it is very well articulated as well that we need to have next gen leaders, but don't you think, or do you think that I may be wrong as well, there needs to be some amount of leashing as well, because fresh values might also hinder some traditional values that have been ongoing within an organization, and it may not be giving you present results, but it definitely has a future impact of why they were put into place. So sometimes they're also tiff when it comes to fresh leadership ways of thinking with coinciding with the traditional beliefs. How do you think companies should combat such circumstances wherein both are important in their own ways, because fresh values are giving you the result of present instances, while traditional beliefs have been made due to certain things that were ongoing already. So how do you think that organizations should actually imbibe both these qualities and help the organization run?
I think it's a very interesting question. So you're saying that an organization has some traditional values.
Right.
Through many years, which have had a good street in for many years, and there are people coming with fresh values, and then you are saying that these fresh values could be at times, conflicting with the traditional values.
Exactly.
And how the organization can, use a leash or control. First of all, I think the organization's time of controlling things, I think they have already they're gone by. You cannot do that. You can only set things in harmony. I mean to say, you can maybe bring some forum. First of all, people will come with fresh ideas or new ideas, which may be conflicting to the old set of ideas. So how do you, I don't think you can bring any policy saying that, you can have only these kind of new ideas or these kind of old ideas. Rather, what we have done is that we find that the new gen, team members that we have are, they are not hierarchical, or they hate hierarchies. They are more networked. They have more presence in social media. They would like to have a lot of face time with the senior leadership. So earlier days, people would talk to their managers, and then they will talk to their managers, and then they will seek some kind of, discussion time with the senior leaders. But the new generation, they will not even think about it. So we have created many forums for these kind of interactions. So we have got like coffee with CEO kind of forums. We have got many connect forum, like we call them People Connect, HR Connect, and so on. And these forums are able to, I think, democratize ideation. And then, if there's a novel idea and you think it is in line with your purpose, then you will make it work. whether it is hitting your old idea, and for that reason you have to throw the old set of things outside the window, you will do that. If it is, falling in purpose, if there is a reason. And yeah, so that is one thing that we have seen. You're talking about policies, a very interesting question that you are saying. Many of our policies have changed because we got a lot of voice from people that these are of no, they question our values, and we find if the question is very relevant, we listen to them. Like, we had a very strange kind of policy in travel, and I don't know what was the reason that, you cannot order or you cannot buy water. I don't know why. Maybe we had, we were traveling abroad and water was very expensive and so on. You can't order, or you can buy water bottle, but you can't claim them. And we had people who questioned this. Young generation said, ki, water is so necessary, and how can you have this policy in writing? Then we had a policy that, you cannot go for room service. You can't order food, or maybe it was expensive or so on. And they said that we travel and the entire day, and then when we come back to hotel, we don't feel like going out to eat. So why can't we order food? Why can't we have this room service, dinner on room service? And when we found that this is relevant. I think this is a good question, or this is something which is questioning your old belief of financial control or whatever, and then we change these policies. So I think you have to only create a forum for ideation, for free flow of all kind of fresh or old ideas, and if they are aligned, then they will be successful. Yeah.
I can just compliment to what she said. I think Renu put her perspective, but in my mind, I think there are two kind of things to answer to your question. Number one is values, and the other one is the behaviors. To me, values is inherent to an organization's DNA, to its culture. That should, in all purposes and for all practical reasons, stay relevant at all given point in time, right? So if I look at the organizations that I've worked with or I'm working with, our values have been intact forever, right? So there are 4 values, at least that Ericsson has. I don't want to spend time talking about the values. But what keeps evolving are the behaviors that you expect people to embrace and exhibit to bring those values to life. So to me, the evolving generation of leaders that we are developing, or the ever-changing times that we are living in, behaviors have to truly become representative of the times that we are living in. And that's where the mindset comes into the play. Behaviors that we believe, like I spoke about, the 5 behaviors come into play. But when it comes to values, for example, we have perseverance, professionalism as 2 of the 4 values, right? And then we have integrity as well as respect as the other 2. So these 4 values have stayed with us for 135 years. And at no given point in time have we ever felt that these values become irrelevant or out of context. But the behaviors have constantly evolved. So we've just added integrity to our values, which is important, not just to do what you do, but how you do becomes equally important in the times that we're living in.
No, it is equally important on how you actually put it into action, because that actually lays the foundation that even if you are to put in different policies in place, there is a certain framework that we needs to follow.
Correct.
Also, now when we talk about in the new gen or the next gen leadership, diversity is something that, we are actively talking about. How do you think, I open this question to Renu. Renu, how do you think that, the new age leadership can actually put in their great efforts in order to bring holistic use of diversity or inclusion under one umbrella? Because, as a traditional leader, they've been leading with number of examples and number of situations. But how, as a next-gen leader, can they actually look into situations, the past histories of how the situations, the traditional leaders have dealt with, and how can they put in new policies to it?
So I don't think the question is very clear to me. I can pass it on to others, because what I can say is that even a new generation of leadership, or be it old generation of leadership, diversity, inclusion, belongingness is a journey which we are all going through.
Right.
Who had thought about that LGBTQ will be such a topic that will be discussed so openly? Yet acknowledgement is still not there at times. So I think just because they belong, or somebody belongs to a different generation, the person would be inclusive, because inclusiveness is a new value of the times. I think we are just assuming things, What has been their experience for inclusion? And if somebody of a different class also, maybe economically backward class, but he or she has experienced inclusion and the benefits of it, can bring the topic forward. So I don't necessarily align it or link it with the new generation kind of thing.
Can I add? Yeah, sure. So I think for me, yeah. So I think for me, it starts from the mindset. It starts from that heterogeneous mindset where are you looking at only similarities, or do you want to also embrace differences? For me, diversity is not just about, and it starts also from the intent and execution of diversity, where we have an intent of having diversity across race, gender, especially able people. But it's also about how are we embracing actually and executing, whether it is smaller steps, but has it become normalcy? Has it attained that normalcy in your organization? And leaders today, I think more are they are very open. When I say open, in terms of getting challenged also, they're open to accept feedback, and that's where diversity for me comes in, because diversity of mind is where it starts from. If you are able to take feedback and ready to be challenged by people across your organization, I think you're able to embrace diversity, and you're able to include it really and provide equitable, robust system in the organization.
Can I just add to this?
Sure.
I think a couple of things. Number one, I think this topic of diversity and inclusion is beaten to death. To me, it's quite clear that the train has left the station. If people still believe they need more proof points to say that diversity and inclusion is important, then I guess they really have to introspect and self-check. But to me, if people are not on the journey, they should be out of the train or get off the train already now. So that's number one. Number two, there's an intent in an organization to make D&I their primary goal. Then go out and be bold and publicly own it, right? So I've seen organizations being shy about owning and claiming what they will end up achieving. But for us, at least at Ericsson, we've been very clear from the top, and the tone from the top is quite clear. That be the change you want to see. We've publicly gone out and said 30% of our workforce should be diversity candidates by the end of 2030. So both being bold and owning our ambitions and publicly claiming it is extremely important. Third, the only way we can succeed on this journey is by having the leaders having unwavering support and commitment towards making that change. So we've invested heavily in creating inclusive mindset into our leaders, doing unbiased trainings, making it clear to leaders that they have targets, right? That they have to own. And success is not just about what, it's also the how on they make their results happen. The last thing I would say that there are lots of initiatives like investing in our campus programs. That 50% of what we have from the campuses are diversity candidates. We have mid-level investment programs on leaders where we are investing in women leaders to accelerate availability of talent pool at the top level, because waiting for things to happen overnight is a bit of a recipe for disaster. We will never have diversity candidates, whether it comes to race, gender, generational, or ethnicity happening from outside. We've got to be investing in it ourselves. And lastly, launching ERGs in relevant pockets where employees can bring the change. So these employee resource group work on specific aspects of diversity and inclusion to bring that change, right? That we want the society to see, the organization to see, employees to see. So to me, it's really about having the commitment and making our leaders the talent magnets, which start to spark the change that we want to see when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Fair enough, and I completely understand that this topic isn't something, and when we talk about diversity, it isn't something that is new to the organizations, because now people have also understood that it is not just the inclusion of women that we're talking about in the diversity segment. It's got a broad spectrum to it. But then thank you so much everyone for joining us for this discussion, and for the panelists to be taking out time and giving out their knowledgeable inputs. Thank you so much.